Nyoonga, the Nyoonga people of the southwest. Now that word Nyoonga itself actually means man, but as a collective term today, the word itself represents 14 different tribal groups of the south. And the area of land we are talking about was no further north than Geraldton, no further east than a small wheatbelt town called Merredin, and all the way to the south coast, Esperance. So within this area there were 14 different tribal groups. They all shared one language, but they had a different dialect each. The difference being tomato and tomato. Those people inland have different words to those on the coastal areas. But if we briefly zoom out to the whole of Australia, at the time of settlement there were over 250 different Aboriginal language groups. Within that, around 700 or so different dialects. There were lots of words out there. For today's purpose though, we're going to zoom right back into where we are here today. We're going to take a 50-kilometre radius around Perth City. Our local tribe were known as the Wadjuk. You might have noticed the road out the back is called Wadjuk Way. The car park is called the Wadjuk Car Park. The word Wadjuk simply means the carers of the link between the land and the ocean. That great link, of course, being the beautiful Swan River, which in the language here we call Derbil Yarragon. The first word Derbil means freshwater and saltwater mixing. The second word Yarragon is the tortoise, which we find further upstream where the water gets fresh. But once a year, the river, once the summer did start to approach, our local people would call this river a songline or a dreaming trail. And this was an ancient pathway that was followed year in, year out without fail. So as that summer did approach, all of our Wadjuk people would gather to the hills of Perth. They would split into two groups, the men and the women. The women travelled the southern shores of the Swan River, taking with them the children. They stopped and stayed at Point Walter, such an environmentally friendly area, easy to teach the children the basic aspects of life. But on the northern shores of the river travelled the men, with the young boys to become men this year. It was their Rites of Passage journey, and in Claremont Bay, the boys would get a scar on their arm to identify them as a man. There's a plant in the area called the hakea. Burn the bark of this plant. It produces a pure white ash. Rub the ash into the cut, it will advance the healing process. They healed for 2 weeks. Once their arm had healed, the final initiation challenge was to swim across the river onto the big sandbar of Point Walter. Once they walked that land as men, they were reunited with the women, and they would all travel to Fremantle for a giant festival. And Fremantle we call Wallula, the beautiful bay by the edge of the water. Some people call Fremantle Manjari, which means festival or fairground place, as it was, where that great gathering took place to celebrate the waterway, the people, the rites of passage for the boys, and the journey in general. So we're going to have a look at that journey in a bit more detail a bit later, but for now we're going to take a stroll through the Botanic Gardens of Western Australia. We're going to find some plants that were useful for both food and for medicine.